Oh, welcome to my world history notes where I read from the book that I wrote to teach homeschoolers world history. A Bible believer looks at world history. Kind of tells you where I'm coming from. If you're interested, you can find the book on lulu.com, amazon.com, or the Bible Baptist bookstore. We're going to be in a very interesting, for me anyway, I say that we I'm going to be at a very interesting thing here, talking about some things to do with end times prophecies. And so let me just go on. So, Trajan, the first Roman emperor born outside of Italy, reigned from 98 to 117. He was born in Spain. He dealt with a revolt in the province of Dacia, present day Romania and Moldova, called the Dacian Wars from 101 to 107, which is memorialized by Trajan's column in Rome. Great leaders do not memorialize or glorify their defeats and disasters in monuments, but only their successes. Let this be a lesson to you when you cannot find a monument in Egypt dedicated to the loss of the Pharaoh and all of his army in the Red Sea at the Exodus. It would be ludicrous to expect to find such a monument. Excuse me. The Apostle John had written his book about the end of human history in or around 96 under the reign of Domitian, many scholars believe. The early church leaders who studied under the apostle believed these events to be future, but the doctrine of preterism, elaborated under Jesuit priest Luis de Alcazar in his 16th century work, Investigation into the Hidden Sense of the Apocalypse, states that all these events were past events that occurred at the fall of Jerusalem. By claiming that pagan Rome was the kingdom of the Antichrist and that Nero was indeed the beast, it was hoped to divert attention from the widespread Protestant belief that the papacy was the very Antichrist spoken of as the beast in Revelation. The word Antichrist is not found in the book. The Apostle John's students, those who claimed to have studied directly under him, were Polycarp, who was stabbed and his corpse burnt at the stake in Smyrna in 167, and Papias, martyred in or around 135, among others. We learn a great deal about what the original writings of the apostles contain, excuse me, by reading the many quotes of the early church leaders, commonly called, quote, fathers. John, who lived part of his later life as a convict on the island of Patmos, had instructed many of these early leaders in what Jesus had told him, as they claimed. For instance, in the Authorized version of the Bible, translated in the early 1600s, which, with its release being 1611 after a 7-year effort, we find the verse 1 Timothy 6:10, which states in part, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." And we find that Polycarp, writing his letter to the Philippians in the early 2nd century, in the very first line of chapter 4, entitled Various Exhortations, refers to this exact quote. The over 30,000 quotations that the early church leaders cited the writings of the apostles are a big help to understanding our Bibles and how they came to be. The view of Revelation of the early church leaders was that it was future history or a prophecy of future events. This is called futurism today, but in the first 3 centuries of the Christian era, it was known as Achillesism or millennialism, stating the belief that the Lord Jesus Christ would return to rule from earth for 1,000 years between human history's end and eternity's beginning. There is another view called historicism that states that these events have unfolded over the past 2,000 years as well. There are as well many variations of all these beliefs, such as partial preterism. But these, while great subjects of theological debate, are only relevant in their historical sense, to be mentioned as movements and beliefs that affected the Christian church in some way. I have oversimplified all these beliefs, and anyone who is a diehard proponent of one or the other would accuse me of demeaning their belief system. So let's move on for the purpose of this study. Achillesism, the early belief by the church fathers concerning the end times, would produce statements by Shepherd in 150, who refers to the church being saved from the tribulation to come, Victorinus in 240, referring to the rapture of the church, Cyprian in 250, referring to the rapture, and the most extensive work on millennialism by Ephraim the Syrian in the late 300s in his work on the last times. I've got some quotes here. I've got a lot of quotes. I'm not going to repeat all these. You can find them in my book. Um, I use several websites and sources. There's some great sources that have these, and you have to figure that there's going to be variations in translation and interpretation. But yeah, I have Shepherd, Victorinus, Cyprian, as I said, Ephraim the Syrian, um, Papias, like example in fragment 6 in Papias, who lived from 70 to 155 roughly. After the resurrection of the dead, Jesus will personally reign for 1,000 years. He was taught this by the Apostle John himself. Justin Martyr, he spoke of it, talking about the Antichrist, the beast of Revelation. Antichrist isn't mentioned in the word Antichrist isn't mentioned in Revelation, but it is in other parts of John's writings. Irenaeus in 178 AD, around then, talks about the what's going to happen, a rapture and a judgment and an Antichrist and a beast. Tertullian, the millennial reign against Marcion, he talks about the millennial reign and New Jerusalem are literal. Um, the Antichrist will be a real man and set in a real temple. You have Origen in 230 AD, Commodianus in 240 AD, Lactantius in 285 AD, Hippolytus. I've got quotes of theirs. Victorinus again. So there's just a lot of the early church believed that in the futurism that there will be a future point in time where Christ will return to take the world, take all the kingdoms of the world, like Revelation 11:15, and then rule for 1,000 years, and that the church would be removed before the worst of the worst happened. Um, so that was their belief. That's certainly not the belief of many Christians today, but it is what it is. So we're going to stop there, and we're going to begin next week with some information about paganism creeping into Christian worship, and then go on to Trajan, some of Trajan's events, his successes, and mention Gibeon, Parthian Empire, things like that. So that'll be for next time. So thank you for watching and listening. I hope that it spurs you on to study world history for yourself and the Bible, because this is about a Bible believer looks at world history. So have a good day.